this video, we are going to learn about the ecosystem, biomes, and species. An ecosystem is a geographic area where plants, animals, and other organisms, as well as weather and landscape, work together to form a bubble of life. Ecosystems contains biotic or living, as well as abiotic factors or non-living parts. Biotic factors include plants, animals, and other organisms. Abiotic factors include rocks, temperature, and humidity. Every factor in an ecosystem depends on every other factor, either directly or indirectly. A change in the temperature of an ecosystem will often affect what plants will grow there, for instance. Animals that depend on plants for food and shelter will have to adapt to the changes, move to another ecosystem, or perish. There are 4 types of ecosystem. The 4 ecosystem types are classification known as artificial, terrestrial, lentic, and lotic. First is the terrestrial. Terrestrial ecosystem are land systems such as forests, deserts, grasslands, tundras, and coastal regions. Depending on the biome's climate, more than one terrestrial ecosystem can be present. For example, tundras have less plant life because of lower temperature. Deserts produce fewer plants because of higher temperature. A forest or grassland may have an extreme variety of plants because its biome has the right amount of sunlight and moisture for many ecosystems and species to grow. The second one is the lentic. Lentic is a class of aquatic ecosystem that are found on land such as ponds, rivers, lakes, swamps, and streams. Mostly, lentic ecosystems are described as still bodies of fresh water, and they are smaller ecosystems. Some lentic ecosystems contain animals and microorganisms, but they mostly rely on photosynthesis of algae and underwater plants to produce energy to thrive. One of the requirements of a lentic body of water is that it is exposed to the sun to encourage photosynthesis. The third one is the lotic. Lotic ecosystems are similar to the lentic in that they are part of the aquatic water class, and the life they support is similar to the found in lentic ecosystems. The lotic systems are moving bodies of water that flows to other bodies of water and eventually to the ocean. These systems can include springs, rivers, and streams, or any body of water that flows to marine-like waters or the ocean. Unlike lentic, the lotic systems do not thrive off photosynthesis and can include bodies of fresh and salt water, such as an estuary where fresh water mixes into saltwater flow. Lastly is the artificial. Although artificial ecosystems could be included with terrestrial, lentic, and lotic, some feel it is important to environmentalism to examine man-made systems. Man-made systems include areas as large as beaches and forests, and those as small as terrariums. For example, sometimes they are made to replenish the environment and other times they are to help environmentalists learn. Biodomes, for example, are closed, artificial ecosystems created for the study of biology. And now, let's proceed to the other topic of ecosystem, which is the producers, consumers, and the decomposers. Plants are the producers in the ecosystem as they manufacture their food by using energy from the sun. In the forest, these form communities of plant life. In the sea, these include tiny algae forms to large seaweed. The herbivorous animals are primary consumers as they live on the producers. In a forest, these are the insects, amphibia, reptiles, birds, and mammals. The herbivorous animals include, for example, hare, deer, and elephants that live on plant life. They graze on grass or feed on the foliage from trees. In grasslands, There are herbivores such as black buck that feed on grass. At a higher trophic level, there are carnivorous animals, or secondary consumers, which live on herbivorous animals. In our forest, the carnivorous animals are tigers, leopards, jackals, foxes, and small wild cats. In carnivores in the sea, carnivorous fish live on other fish and marine animals. Animals that live in the sea range in size from microscopic forms to giant mammals such as the whale. Decomposers or detrivores are a group of organisms consisting of small animals like worms, insects, bacteria, and fungi which break down dead organic material into smaller particles and finally into simpler substances that are used by plants as nutrition. Decomposition thus is a vital function in nature, as without this, all the nutrients would be tied up in dead matter and no new life could be produced. And now, we are going to know what is biomes. The whole surface of Earth is a series of connected ecosystems. Ecosystems are often connected in a larger biome. A biome is a large area characterized by its vegetation, soil, climate, and wildlife. There are 5 major types of biomes: aquatic, grassland, forest, desert, and tundra, though some of these biomes can be further divided into more specific categories such as freshwater, marine, savanna, tropical rainforest, temperate rainforest, and taiga. We already know the difference between ecosystem and biomes. Before we proceed to the species, we need first to differentiate an ecosystem to biomes. The difference between biome and ecosystem has to do with their roots definition and what they describe. A biome is a large region of the world that has similar plants, animals, and other organisms that are adapted to the terrain and weather of that region. An ecosystem is the interaction of plants and animals with non-living and each other. Each organism has a role to play within the ecosystem. A biome is simply a classification of an area based on the things within it. The species that live there are determined by temperature, geographic location, climate, and more. An ecosystem, on the other hand, refers to the actual interaction, relationships, communities, and populations of organisms and non-living things within biomes. You can think of a biome as a broad classification of an area, while an ecosystem refers to interactions and specific within that general classification. You can actually have multiple ecosystems within a single biome. For example, one type of biome is a marine biome. Within that biome, you can have many ecosystems like a coral reef, the intertidal zone, a kelp forest, and the open ocean. Let's proceed to the last topic, which is the species. A species is a group of organisms that share a genetic heritage, are able to interbreed, and to create offspring that are also fertile. Different species are separated from each other by reproductive barriers. These barriers can be geographical, such as mountain range, separating two populations, or genetic barriers that do not allow for reproduction between the two populations. We are now going to know the different taxonomy hierarchy. Taxonomy is the practice of identifying different organisms, classifying them into categories, and naming them. All organisms, both living and extinct, are classified into distinct groups with other similar organisms and given a scientific name. The classification of organisms has various hierarchical categories. Categories gradually shift from being very broad and including many different organisms to very specific and identifying single species. First, which is in the highest hierarchy, is kingdom. For a long time, all life was separated into 5 or 6 kingdoms. These included kingdoms such as animals, plants, fungi, protists, archaea, and bacteria. With new genetic data, we know that some protists are more closely related to animals, plants, and fungi than they are to other protists. This suggests that the protist kingdom could be separated into multiple kingdoms. Thoughts are similar for the bacteria and archaea kingdoms. The second hierarchy is the phylum. A phylum, or plural phyla, is still a very broad classification, but it splits kingdoms into multiple groups. An example of phyla from animal kingdom is Arthropoda, which includes all insects, spiders, crustaceans, and more. All vertebrate animals belong to one phylum called Chordata. Invertebrates are separated into many different phyla. Class. A class is the next level down. Some classes from the phylum Chordata include mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. Arthropod classes include the likes of insects and arachnids, spiders, mites, and scorpions. Order and family. From class, organisms are placed into an order and then a family. Genus and species. The final two categories are genus and species. The genus and species that an organism belongs to are how an organism receives its scientific name. This naming system is called binomial nomenclature and was invented by a brilliant biologist named Carl Linnaeus. An identified species is placed into a specific group in each of these categories. For example, the taxonomic classification of human is Kingdom Animalia, Phylum Chordata, Class Mammalia, Order Primates, Family Hominid, Genus Homo, Species Homo sapiens. To remember the order of the taxonomic hierarchy from domain to species, people often use mnemonics to make it easier. The phrase that I was taught and still used to help me remember is King Philip came over from Great Spain. It's up to you if what will be the phrase you're going to do to remember the taxonomic hierarchy. And that's it for today's video. Let's see you again in another video. Fighting!